Hi, my name's Sonam, and today I wanted to talk to you about how you can use mindfulness and meditation to get more out of your application of internal family systems, or IFS. Now, for those of you who don't know, IFS is this kind of very exciting therapeutic modality, which a lot of people who aren't going into therapy necessarily or don't see a therapist are starting to use in their day-to-day lives. It's a very kind of pragmatic way for conceptualizing ourselves and also our disconnection, or the ways in which we find moving through life a little bit difficult sometimes. If we go to therapy, there's this idea of, feeling a bit better, but also generally in our life, sometimes we want to flow a bit more. The idea of internal family systems is that there could be parts of our humanness, like modes of behavior, different ways of functioning, that throughout our history we have systematically sort of disconnected from. And it's when we disconnect from these parts that life gets really tumultuous. It's sort of like this idea of mental disorder, not having a mental disorder, but if there's parts of yourself that you don't feel comfortable feeling and being, then this can put more of a burden on other ways of being, which then have to compensate, because say you're never allowed to feel sad, you might have to feel anger, and then this anger or establishing of boundaries is protecting you much more than it needs to. You experience your life as an angry person, which you might not like, so therefore by getting back in touch with this part of you, like the ability to feel sad, you have a more complete, holistic, adaptive self to use for when you then navigate through life. The parts don't have to be purely emotions. Technically, a part is kind of a symbolic reference to any way of being yourself. So maybe they change over time, maybe you zoom in on different pieces, maybe a part of you is also connected to a memory, maybe a memory is connected to a dream. What a part is isn't so important. It's more this guide towards integrating ourselves more holistically so that we're more flexible. The way IFS guides you through this process is that it encourages you to develop a relationship to the difficulties you're finding in life, the content that brings up, but also the energetic embodiment that brings up into you, how you feel about that, all the sort of references that come through your mind, all the constructs. That's a beautiful feature of IFS because it moves the conventional goalpost towards just perceiving problems in your life and having difficulties with this and, believing you're not good enough, to a shame-free way of examining these really maybe tender or vulnerable aspects of ourselves. If we haven't done this work in the beginning, yes, we perceive a lot of problems and we do feel frustrated ourselves, but all of that is content which we can begin to develop a relationship to, where we honor all these little movements and transitions in our experience of noticing there's something we don't like. How does that make us feel? How does it feel when we reflect on how it makes us feel? And it's this process of getting in touch with and relating to this very fluid way of being ourselves that we might, because there's no preemptive judgment of getting there, that we might begin to reincorporate these pieces into ourselves once we've listened to them and we've learned the wisdom that these energetic clusters or constructions or embodiments have to teach us. Once we've fully appreciated them for what they are. Not what they are conceptually, but what they are as a matter of momentum or movement of energy which is coming through us and constantly changing in flux with this sort of openness and constantly changing nature of life. Actually in just trying to communicate IFS there, I think the nature of my contemplative meditation mindfulness background is coming through in how I'm explaining the IFS anyway. And this little hands up little note that I want to make. IFS does identify this idea of self with a capital S, which is this idea that we all have some sort of intuitive, wise, compassionate part of ourselves, which can be a grounding place to be in and to flow forth from in life in order to navigate life with as much wisdom as we can. Maybe the least amount of regret could be a way of thinking about it, a way in which we always feel a sense of knowing in what we're doing, and a way in which we're very, very adaptive or self-regulating, collapsing into that flow. Now, IFS doesn't actually get too specific about what that zone is. So this is the intervention I want to make with my mindfulness and meditation. I've done a 6-month IFS course, whatever that's worth, and I've done a lot of time in meditation and mindfulness too. IFS is really complementary with meditation and mindfulness because the capital S self, we could say conventionally, has less ego in it. It's sort of less wrapped up in itself. It's more intuitive and natural and open as a mode of functioning rather than seen as a belief or construct about how we're living our lives. And a lot of contemplative traditions target that as, we could say, a sort of goal of, that's why you're meditating so much, is to realize the nature of being beyond all your conceptions, or not reduced to your conceptions and beliefs about what is otherwise a free flowing open experience. Now we have to remember that IFS is a therapeutic modality, so it is mainly being applied to help people reintegrate parts of themselves which have been disconnected or suppressed, to the extent where they're trying to seek some sort of healing kind of a methodology, not some supreme, like ultimate wise kind of meditative Buddhist insight. The opportunity I can see is that you might just learn IFS to like sit down or be moving throughout your life, and you notice these parts come up that cause you a discomfort, and then you might from that position try to correct for it, or even once you've gotten used to correcting for it, you might start anticipating how this process is going to play out. What that could start to cultivate is a self-like sort of spiritual manager or healer or hero part of you. There's this potential that when you're sitting down to do your IFS, you're slightly out of touch with your presence or immediate experience, where you notice this memory or this part of you which you want to focus on a bit. You're like, this construct in me is creating discomfort, and you start asking yourself, what is this part? Hey part, how are you doing? Can you tell me more about you? And then maybe what you do is you switch in your mind to that perspective, and you start giving yourself this answer. You're like, well, yeah, I mean, when this thing happened to me, I felt this way. So you kind of go from an interest, but maybe a little bit of a conditional interest. An interest is in, I want this part to get better or to tell me something. I need to get to know this part. To the part telling you a story. And that telling of the story is important, and wanting to get somewhere is important too. But I want to point out that even those things are slight little constructions, which from the meditation and mindfulness background can just be a little bit more formless. They can kind of simmer, be less tight, be less rigid, be more open. The intervention I'm suggesting is, if there's a part there, is it possible to notice that you could be inquiring into it with a little bit of conditionality? It matters what it says. Is it possible to inquire into parts or constructs openly, where you say, okay, I notice this sadness in me, kind of openly. And there's just like this openness to it for whatever needs to arise to come up. I'm not constructing a sentence to get to know it. I notice that this is there, and I'm open. I can remain open to noticing whatever else comes up. And even that remaining open, I think, is the act of compassion, because then maybe you're more freed up, you're inviting more information to come through. And then maybe another piece of you comes in which doesn't like the information. And is it okay to be open with that information? And so we can kind of really get into this meditative, a very similar experience to meditation, where we're noticing the arising. We're not judging or pushing it away, but we're noticing these energies, letting them fully play themselves out. Because if we stay with that noticing, the nature is that these things will move through on their own without us needing to control it so much. And in that, you can really refine your system tremendously through IFS with this meditation and mindfulness. Maybe that's too steep. I'm kind of giving the second piece of advice there first, to be fully open to let these parts show you what they want. But perhaps the previous step to that is being able to be open. So it's like getting to know that there's self-like parts of you which are orchestrating this whole healing journey or reintegration process in the first place. If that bit feels too hard, can you form the relationship or move the integration back one step and ask yourself questions like, what's this healing about? Why is this important to me? And be open to that. And then in there might be some vulnerability or tenderness. And can you be open with that? And that might make the whole process of IFS more flexible. And I get soft there because I think it gets really close to the fundamental way in which we're reconnecting with all of ourselves to begin with. For me, what comes up is this desire or presence to be enough, or to be okay, to be able to relax, to be allowed to sit back and be all right with everything that's already here, without any subtle striving to perfect the next moment or make the next moment better. To recognize before it takes hold that it's okay to be sort of a human, incomplete, struggling and striving all the time in a chaotic world, to get sort of a better grip on things. Is that whole process all right? And then if it is, from there, it feels like, it can collapse back into energy and the system can keep reorganizing itself in this way. That's just my personal experience of it, and that's what's weird about making content about this. Your journey to healing is deeply personal. So I have this endless compassion for you as a person out there on the other side, trying whatever it is you're trying. I have this compassion for that piece of you. And then the rest is sort of lovely and free-flowing anyway. So I say some things in case it helps, in case you're in the position where this maps on at all to the piece of you which is lost. And I'm motivated and wish we all find our way back home. And that we construct ourselves in ways that make it easier to remember where home is.